Hello again, and welcome to Media War Stories, behind the scenes tales from the front lines of the media. I'm your host, Tom Curley. How are you all doing today? If this is the first time you've listened to the show, me and old friends of mine get together. We worked in the industry. I was a director for CBS for almost 35 years, and we get together with other people who've been in the business, like this character, Mr. Gary Armstrong, who was a veteran TV reporter for Boston
Howdy.
for almost the same amount of time. Gary, how you doing? How are things?
Um, we're functioning. Just before we went on the air, Marilyn and I, uh, Marilyn had some serious stuff going on in with where she had previously had surgery on her chest, and it was very painful. In the meantime, I was went into the kitchen to grab a pastry and cut my finger. I have a boo boo here. Cut my finger opening the pastry box, and I spent the next 15 to 20 minutes, I thought, washing the pastry thing off my fingers. It was blood, and big deal, right? But it just kept
Yeah.
bleeding and bleeding and bleeding, and it reminded me of a thousand other stories. But you know something, when you introduced your co-host, I think you should leave the word old out and just say friends, because we know we're old. And
Yes, that's true. I think that's
it
pretty
really,
obvious.
really.
Yeah.
Hey, it was good to see
What
you
is
in the
it? It's
flesh the other day. You were here for a
oh,
little
that is
social
true.
gathering we had.
We were
Yeah, it
social
was a lot of
gathering.
fun.
It was really cool. Got to come up to the
Yep.
Kachinga Rosa, as you call your lovely home. Um, so anyway, last week's show we were talking about special events and flashing on and stuff, and we touched on
Right.
a topic that is fascinating, which is that the news biz are obsessed with not just exclusives, but getting on the air first. If an event happens, something happens.
Right.
The being the
Right.
first to go on the air. The first time I experienced it, and it was really funny, um, was it was a long time ago, and it was 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. Something happened. Plane fell out of the sky. Something, and we flashed on, and it was, to me, eventless. We got on, we got off, everything was fine. And then as I was walking down the hall to leave, the executive producer, who was in charge of the flashing on at the time, came up to me, and he was pumped. And he pats me on the back and he goes, "Great job, Tom. Great job. Everybody, we beat everybody by 30 seconds." And I just went, "Yeah, okay." And and I guys, you do realize that everybody only watches one channel at a time. Nobody at home
Right.
has three TVs with all the networks up to
Right.
see who came
Right.
in first. And and they do this, like they used to do this on the evening news all the time. You know, all the control rooms, the producers have um, monitors. They're looking at ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, Fox, CNN, and whatever. And they spend the whole day setting up a rundown. Okay, we're going to do this story first, this story next, this story next. Now, all three networks are going to cover, and including the cable networks, are all going to cover the same
Exactly.
stories every day because
Exactly.
it's the news. Okay, well, except for
Right.
Fox, they'll be covering something completely different.
Yeah.
But that's another story. But what used to happen all the time is they would go on the air, and the producers look up and they go, "Oh my God, ABC is running this story first. NBC is running this," and they would switch the whole rundown. Now, you've spent all,
Right.
so now all of the editors have got to switch tapes. Everybody's got to switch scripts. So, you're live on the air. You
Yes.
had this nice show. And I would sit in the audio booth going, "Guys, nobody cares." The fact that you led with story A and everybody else led with story B, it was crazy. And the last story, which I feel bad about, it was a perfect example of this. Uh, there's almost a tunnel vision. News executives and producers and everybody, they just go into a frenzy when you're going to flash on. And the saddest example was uh, uh, the night that Yasser Arafat died, and the crew of the show that was going to go on later was there, getting ready for the show that was going to go on later, and a memo had come out to all the news to, people that said, if Yasser Arafat is not doing it all well, if he dies, when he dies, do not flash
Right.
on. All right, just make a crawl, okay? And the little thing along the bottom of the screen. And okay, well, it turns out that like 10 minutes before 11 o'clock, it was on a Thursday night. I wasn't there. I was told this, afterward. He died, and
Right.
the whole team, the whole, the directors, the producers, everybody, they just went into full hyper. Got to get on the air. Got to get on the air. And sure enough, I mean, they were up and ready, and they flashed on like 5 minutes before 11. And I could have the numbers off a little, but I'm close. Now the problem there was that the show that it interrupted was NYPD Blue, which happened to be at the time Les Moonves, who at the time was the CEO of
Mm-hmm.
CBS. It was one of his favorite shows. So he was sitting at home watching his favorite show. And this particular episode was sort of a whodunit. So in the last five
Right.
minutes, they revealed, who the killer is. But what the people at home saw, and the killer is, we interrupt this show for a special report from CBS News. Unless, yeah, unless Moonves went postal because, one, this was his favorite show, and he didn't know who the hell the killer was. And what was amazing to me, in hindsight, but then again, I wasn't there as I went, guys, nobody, not one of you stopped and said, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? And it was at that moment
Right.
that the producer who was in charge suddenly went, oh my God, what did I just do? I'm going to get fired. And didn't make it till the end of the shift. That's how quickly the producer got fired. And I always felt bad because
Yeah.
she was a wonderful person, a
That's
great
insane.
producer, and didn't deserve it. But but what I found fascinating about the whole thing is how nobody stopped to question. Nobody. It was that drive, that you have to be first,
Right.
overrides everything. And the perfect example is if you listen to the Howard Stern show, he has all these prank callers who will. This one guy, I think his name was Captain Jenks. He was very good at getting into newsrooms, getting on the air, pretending to be somebody regarding the story, and then after he'd yanked their chains for a minute or so, he would go baba booey baba booey Howard Stern, Howard Stern, and then they would hang up on him, and Howard Stern would play it the
Right.
next day. But he had it so during the OJ trial, no, not the OJ trial, the OJ low speed chase, and when he came back
Yes.
home, has basically he managed to get into ABC News. Peter Jennings was on the air along with Al Michaels, which is a sportscaster. But anyway, he was on the air, and they were covering this, wall to wall coverage. And all of a sudden, Peter Jennings goes, we have exclusive. We have a neighbor who is actually can see into the house. He can actually see OJ.
We have on the phone with us as well Robert Higgins, who lives in the neighborhood and is on the ground and can see inside the van. Mr. Higgins.
Yes, how are you?
Just about as tense as you are, sir.
Oh, my Lord, this is quite the tenses.
What can you see?
Oh, what I'm looking at right now is I'm looking at the van, and I see OJ kind of slouching down, looking very, very upset.
And this guy goes on the air, and I recognized who it was, but he's doing this. Hello there. I see OJ. Yeah, I can see OJ. I see him. He's right there.
I can see it all, and I see OJ. I see OJ, man, and he looks scared. And I would be scared because there's cops all deep in this.
Thank you, Mr. Higgins.
And baba booey to y'all.
And and he let him go on for about a minute. And at this point, Al Michaels he goes, guys, I don't know how to tell you this, but that's not a real caller.
Peter, by the way, just for the record, this is Al Michaels. That was a totally farcical call. Lest anybody think that that was somebody who was truly across the street. That was not. He said something in code at the end that's indicative of the mentioning of the name of a certain radio talk show host.
Okay, thanks, Al.
So he was not there.
All right, we have them on every coast. Thank you very much.
He's a Howard Stern guy, and and they're Peter Jennings. Just they all had egg on their faces. But that's what happens when you are so desperate to to be exclusive and get on the air first. I'm sure you have similar
Yes.
similar examples. Like what?
Yeah, I wasn't going to tell the story, but as to happen so often between the two of us, I have something that's similar. I was in the studio, and it was the lead story, and I don't remember, it was a trial. Um, and someone had called just before we went into the show open. It was an obscene call, and I just indicated to the AD, the assistant director, that we had a problem, and I quickly scribbled out obscene phone call. And they shook their head, indicating they knew what the problem was and they would take care of it. So the show open goes by. I start talking, and clearly, not that far from me, I can hear the obscene phone call continuing. Now, remember how we talk about the talent people can talk their way through anything, mentally dismissing background noise. Well, in this case, as I was delivering my report, I could hear really that close to my microphone. I could hear the person saying, I like the way he wears his pants. His pants are nice and tight. I like that. I like tight pants. And I'm reading straight ahead, and you could see trying not to laugh. And I'm one of my eyes, I'm looking up, and no one's responding. Just remove the take the phone away. It just kept going and going. I wrapped up the story, and I did the usual, we'll be back right after this. And before they cut away from me, the last bits of that live obscene phone call is, he can bring his pants to my house anytime. Yes. And they went to a commercial, and I just looked up, and the news director came running out and saying, what, Gary, why did you do that? And I said, I was on the air, and we had this happen just before we went on the air. And then he looked at me and said, those pants are tight, Gary. I said, what? And he said, you're back on the air. And I went from the big smile to the very solemn jabbering away. As it turns out, that midday, it was a midday newscast, and we normally ranked last. But it turns out, because of that obscene phone call, we drew number one ratings for that time period. So the news director said, we have to have something like that to liven up our newscast. And I said, well, I'm not going to do anything with obscene phone calls. That's ridiculous. And he said, but it's bringing
So,
ratings in. And then it went up to the general manager, and then it went up to the owner of the station, and they all agreed that whatever ambient stuff happened around the newscast, if it made the ratings go, so forth. So
so,
I don't know how you explain
so
stuff like that.
how? So
But you know what I was thinking about? It flipped. Let's flip this over. The manic drive to be first. This is this is again. I don't know why so many of the stories that I have problems with revolve around trials. It's because there are a lot of things going on. I had just had surgery a few days before for, I think we can say this in our podcast, hemorrhoids. And I was getting my way around on a cane, walking cane. I was stupid enough to go into work because they usually say, well, if you're not dead, you should be here at work. So I did a report to work. And I said, I'm having problems getting around. And they said, well, it's a trial. There's nothing really physical about it. I said, okay, but remember, I can't move very fast. And they said, no problems. We'll take care of you. Famous last words. So it's cropping up to around noon again. And I'm in there at the trial, and it's a critical point, and you're focused on getting the information from the witnesses because you don't want to get that kind of thing wrong. And the pager or whatever device went off and said, I can see 5 is going first. You got to get out to the truck. And I said, I told you I can't move very fast. Well, we want you outside right now. I said, okay, okay. So someone threw me my cane, and I literally walked out like Chester from Gunsmoke with the cane. And I'm hobbling across the street. And our live camera is following me saying, we'll have the lead story. We have a top notch information biscuit for you. And here comes Gary Armstrong with that story. And he came out bravely on his cane. And we're going to be topping this story. And the camera just follows me hobbling across the street, and people are applauding me like that. And I got to the camera. They threw me the headset. I went on the air, and I was leaning on my cane. And as I proceeded to deliver the intro to whatever the tape was, one of the crew members ripped the cane away from me, and I fell down. And you could hear people laughing in the background. And as I got up, I said, "That just shows you the tenure of this trial. It has everyone in knots, and we're sorry for the shakiness of the presentation." And then there was applause in the background. Boy, he's tough. He can take it. I'm looking around. The camera pulls out to a wide shot, and there are people applauding me. And there were some people who had canes in the background, and they were waving the canes around. We got off the air. I got the call from the news director saying, "That was great stuff." And I said, "But I didn't really give you the big moment from the trial." And he said, "I don't care. Everybody's talking about that live chat. That was really wonderful." I said, "Okay, I'll be back with you later. I have to get back into the trial. Take your time because we really love that live shot." I said, "That's fine." So it was
That
that
is
mania to
hilarious.
go first. If they hadn't had that drive,
Yep.
they would have allowed me to get out there on my own, and it would have just been, like every other station covering the same story. But the thing was, you have to be first so that you can say between the noon newscast and the next one to come up, you can say, and channel or whatever the network was is first with the story, and we'll have more breaking news. Yada yada yada. That day they said this trial was so important that Gary Armstrong had to hobble out to the live shot. That's because we care about you. Our station cares. Our reporters care. They don't really care about how they feel. They're here to give you the news first because we care about you. First,
I
first,
I love
first.
yeah, first. You know what? I have to admit I have a newfound respect for local news management because every time, if any of that had happened at CBS on the network, there would be endless meetings and somebody would have to fall in their sword. Okay. But
Absolutely, absolutely.
you guys go, I mean, hey, it got ratings. Awesome. Let's do it some more. I mean,
Yeah,
can we get more obscene phone calls? So, I mean, I got to admit, I respect that. And and at least they're honest. I remember
yeah.
there were I loved the promos, local news promos in New York. I remember one that stuck out in my head. It was for ABC, Channel 7, oddly enough. And it was about how Channel 7 had more news helicopters. They had more news and traffic helicopters than any of the other local stations. And they said, "We have air superiority." And I went, "Air what, like what? 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 Like this is a thing."
Holy Ed
And
Murrow.
then I remember, yes, and then the other one that always stuck in my head was I think it was Channel 2. Channel 2, where the news comes first. And I would go, "You're a news show.
What
Of
comes
course the
second?
news comes first." I mean, what? What? It comes first at what? As opposed to the dancing polar bears and the strippers? I mean, just silly, silly, silly stuff. Um, well,
We have
it's
one
funny you talk
station up
about.
here that the promo, if I can remember correctly, news that you will respect. News that you will respect. as opposed to news that you won't respect.
Exactly. I mean, do they
Thinks of
think
these.
any of these things through? Well, also, local news was the first to come up with it. We have to scare you. And these are real. I remember this. Uh, coming up at 11, toxic eggs. 30 things in your refrigerator that can kill you. Uh, if you don't tune in at 11, your children will die. And stuff like that. And they love it. Um, 50 things that can kill your cat. Film at 11. They're crazy. But all right. This doesn't have to do with coming in first, but it does have to do with being injured. All right. So I'm coming to work one morning on the morning news, and I would get in at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and it was the winter time, and it was freezing, and it was raining, and it was sleeting, and I was
Right.
tired, and I was in a bad mood. Well, now the broadcast center is on 57th Street between 11th and 10th and 11th Avenue, and um, between 12th and 11th on 57th Street, there used to be a nightclub called the Copacabana. Okay, and
Right.
usually at
Right. Big
that
one.
time it would be closing and people would be coming out. And so anyway, I'm walking and I've got my head down and I'm walking really fast because I just want to get out of the cold. And as I'm walking, for some reason, I'm sort of walking along the curb, and I had my head down, and somebody uh, shouted out to somebody else. They went, "Hey!" And when you hear something like that, you turn to look. Well, I turned to
Right.
look, and I kept walking, and all of a sudden, I had a spidey sense that something's in front of me, and I turned and I walked headlong into a no parking sign, one of those green steel no parking signs. All right, and I I didn't just walk into it; I bounced off of it. I went bang, and I went,
Wow.
oh God damn! And then I looked, and my hand was drenched in blood because head wound. And I go, oh my
Boy.
God, you know, I've got to go to the emergency room. I'm going to need stitches. But I had to go into work first to
Right.
tell them. And now as I'm walking up the street and I'm bleeding profusely and I'm mad and I'm going, oh God, I have to tell everybody that I walked into a no parking sign. And a little voice in my head said, tell them you were mugged. And I went, no. And I went,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
no,
I understand that one.
I can't, I can't do that. If I did that, I'd be lying, and they might arrest some poor
Right.
schmuck. And so anyway, so I walk into the broadcast center, and of course the security guard looks at me. He says, "Oh my God, are you okay? Were you mugged?" And the little voice in my head says, "See, just say yes." And I went, "No." I went, "No, no, no problem." So so now I go up to the control room and I walk in, and of course everybody, oh my God, Tom, are you okay? Are you okay? And they're all around me. Were you mugged? Did you get
Yeah.
mugged? And the voice is going, just say yes. And I go, no, and they go, what? I go, I walked into a no parking. What? I walked into a no parking sign. Now, you it is amazing within a millisecond how all of this sincere concern and worry immediately morphed into hilarious laughter and total ridicule. Okay, so I mean, I went from victim to you know the butt of a joke. So one
The butt
nice
of the
guy,
joke.
Don Corrados, yeah, butt of literally, yeah. So one nice guy, Don Corrado, he walks me to the emergency room. Fortunately, there was a hospital literally around the corner, and
Right.
sure enough, even in the emergency room, I was being ridiculed. I remember sitting in the the little cubicle with the curtain drawn, and I hear the nurse
Yeah.
outside. She said, "Okay, we got to the." She's talking to the doctor, and she goes, "All right, we got a stroke in Bay 1, we got a heart attack in Bay 2, and we got a no parking sign in Bay 3." And the doctor goes, "What?" Because the moron ran. Because the idiot walked into a no parking sign, and they're both laughing, and I'm
Right.
going like, oh god. So I got stitched up, but yeah, I highly suggest not doing that. Yeah, true story actually happened.
I I agree, and that segues into a story I've told before, but it segues perfectly into what you just told about. Um, Walking across the street from the TV station to the bank, and clear day, and my mind was elsewhere. I wasn't really watching where I was walking, and I'm still reminded to look down and watch where I'm walking by Maryland, and that's like we're talking about 45, maybe 50 years ago. Not quite sure, but I walked right into a perfectly clean glass door. Bang! And I bounced off, I remember, and I fell down, and I consciously remembered the ache in my elbows. And is the first response, and I guess this is the human being in us, my first response was not how badly did I hurt myself, but it was just sheer embarrassment. And there was a little girl who was there with her mom, and the little girl said, "Mommy, why did that man walk into the door?" And the mother said, "Shh, that's Mr. Armstrong. He's a news reporter." "Mommy, I understand that, but why did he walk into the door?" And she said, "Let's go." And so I got up, shook my head off, and I was dazed. Took care of the bank business, still dazed, walked back to the station, shaking my head, walked into the newsroom, and I said, and this is where it parallels what you said about what happened to you. How am I going to explain, being foggy? And someone walked over and said, "What happened?" And I told them, and they said, "No, no, no, no! Don't tell anyone you walked into a door. Tell them that you were assaulted by someone who doesn't like you, who is a racist or something like that. Tell them you were assaulted on the street. Uh, that will play better. We can put that into the news, and you'll look like a hero." And I said, "But I walked into a door," and they said, "You're going to be an idiot if you say that." I said, "Okay, fine." So they sat me down. And as they sat me down at my desk, someone called and said they didn't have any anchors around to do the breaking news. So they looked around, and of course, the first person they saw was Gary. They put me in the anchor seat, went on the air. I couldn't focus on the teleprompter. I was actually ad-libbing something about a story that I really wasn't quite that aware of, but somehow I got through it. But my eyes clearly were glazing over. So we got off the air, and someone else went on and said, "That was Gary Armstrong, blah, 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 blah." And if he appeared to be a little unsteady, that's because he was a victim of this rising tide of violence in Boston. And our prayers go out to him. And we just want to point out what a soldier he is for taking this on after being pummeled outside on the street. And I just looked around and smiled, and someone said, "A glass door? We told you." And they had to put me
They,
on because they wanted to be first with that breaking news story.
of course, of course. Wow. Yes. Yes. As I said, it's crazy. Well, we've done it again. Ran out of time. We had other stuff
Ooh,
to get to, which of course we will get to next week. Let's see how quickly we
of
can get through
course,
the
of
plug.
course.
Serendipity, Seeking Intelligent Life on Earth, Maryland's blog we all contribute to. Voicescapes Audio Theater for the best in audio, comedy, and drama. Just did a really fantastic show last night. Had a lot of fun. The half-hour radio show, the hit cult favorite from the 80s, is still around, and my sister podcast, Get Off My Lawn with me, where we talk about life, the universe, and pretty much whatever is in the teleprompter. Gary, fun show. We will do it again. And until then,
Yes.